August 9th, 1999, a fresh new face enters the world stage. Vladimir Putin, son of working-class parents from St. Petersburg and a former intelligence officer, is appointed Russia's acting prime minister. Less than 5 months later, Boris Yeltsin's resignation opens the door for a new Russian president.
I looked the man in the eye. I found him to be very straightforward and trustworthy.
But as the years progress, Putin tightens his grip on power, determined to restore Russia to its former Soviet glory, whatever the cost. In 2008, Putin declares victory after a short war with Georgia, then again 6 years later annexing Crimea, all while amending the constitution and extending his term limits. Putin has now paved the way to remain in control of the Kremlin until 2036. That would surpass the ruthless reigns of Joseph Stalin, even Catherine the Great.
And joining us now from Moscow is Fred Weir, a Canadian journalist who has lived and worked in Russia for 38 years and is now the Russian correspondent for the Christian Science Monitor. Fred, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. We know the results this weekend are effectively a foregone conclusion, but what are you watching for?
Well, yes, even some Russian official commentators describe it more like a referendum on Vladimir Putin and his policies than any kind of competitive election, because it is far less than elections in the past, which did have some element of competition, some kind of serious opposition that got to use the election as a platform to express their ideas. There's none of that here. So the things that we will look for, I think, are turnout, first of all, and secondly, there could be spoiled ballots. You know, the opposition are urging a boycott, but others say turnout, vote for anybody but Putin, and there are 3 other candidates on the ballot, or write in the name of Alexei Navalny. You'll spoil the ballot, of course, but the spoiled ballot will be counted as a spoiled ballot.
Right, so symbolic protests, and we're also expecting to see a very real protest on Sunday. You know, it's hard for us these days to get a clear read on how ordinary Russians are feeling about their president and the war in Ukraine. How would you describe the mood in Russia these days?
Well, it is hard, even being in the middle of it, to gauge public opinion and what people think. But I think when you say ordinary Russians, I think the majority of them are fine with the way things are. They're not enthusiastic about the war, but my sense is that most Russians think, first of all, it's distant from them because the sanctions don't really bite in everyday life, and the war is far away. And unless you know somebody who's on the front line or something, then it doesn't affect you. But there's a small and a very vocal minority who are sort of pro-West, liberal-minded people who have not accepted the regime that Putin has built.
Journalism is risky business these days in Russia, of course. To my knowledge, I think, Fred, you're the last Canadian journalist left in Russia. We've seen other journalists arrested, kicked out of the country for coverage critical of the Kremlin, even just for calling Russia's invasion of Ukraine a war. How are you feeling? How are you doing these days as a Canadian journalist operating, working in Russia?
A lot of people don't talk to foreign journalists anymore, people who used to. That is a problem. It's getting to be more like Soviet times were in that respect. And at the beginning of the war, I was careful. You know, I had to put special military operation in quotation marks instead of saying war and so on. But I stopped doing that. I write more or less freely, and I don't seem to get any repercussions from it. It's Russian journalists who are in the straitjacket now. If you're a Russian journalist today, it's you're going to have to mind your P's and Q's very carefully, because trouble can come for you. I don't think the Russians care much about us, but about Russian journalists, yes, they do.
Well, we certainly care about you and really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here today, Fred. Fred Weir, who is a Canadian and the Russian correspondent for the Christian Science Monitor based in Moscow. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.